Today's another pleasure to interview and listen to some of the highlights from the life of Larry Pimm. Larry's been a resident of Red Deer for many years, as a teacher initially, and then later as a very successful and significant politician. So he'll get the opportunity to tell us a bit about both. But perhaps we could begin, Larry, with you would tell us a bit about growing up in rural Alberta and how you eventually came to Red Deer.
Well, I was born in Provost in 1943. By that time, my dad had gone overseas as part of the force that was fighting in World War II. We lived in a little apartment above Main Street, and I have some very early memories of Provost that are quite exciting. Probably the most exciting was the day that the snowplane arrived on Main Street. And a snowplane is it's a sled with an airplane motor on it with the big airplane prop, and boy was it noisy. And I'm upstairs looking down at it, and I can remember seeing it very, very clearly. That was an exciting moment for me at that time of my life, and I would have been about 3, I suppose.
Interesting sidelight. The word snowplane comes from Saskatchewan, and there was a company in southern Saskatchewan that made about 400 of those snowplanes, and they were a great advantage to provinces that had flat surfaces and square roads.
Yes, I'm sure they were. I know I can remember it taking off and going up the street, and wow, that was impressive.
They didn't have brakes either.
They didn't have brakes, and I don't know how they steered them. It would have probably not very positive steering, but they were the first snow invention, I think, that we had. But that was part of my growing up. My dad went to war. He ended up fighting in Italy, and unfortunately, on the first day that the battle to take Ortona occurred, he met his end. And that's been something that's been significant to me all my life. When I think about people complaining about the hardships of wearing a mask, and I think of the hardships those men went through, and some lost their lives, it just really, really grits me that these hardships that we talk about today are hardly anything at all.
And Ortona was a tough battle. It was at Christmas time, and the basics for the key battalion there were veteran men from the city of Edmonton and northern Alberta.
Yeah, and later my sister did a biography of my dad, and in it, there's a picture of, it was the dad of one of the teachers who taught in Red Deer, and they were in the same outfit together. And he ended up spending time in a prisoner of war camp. But
was that Ray Hurd?
No, Ray was over there too, but they weren't in the same outfit. Saint Germain, Al Saint Germain. Anyway. That's a little bit off the topic, I guess. But
so you went from Alice to school, and
my mom remarried, and my dad went from place to place following employment opportunities. So I started grade 1 in Camrose in a little tiny school. I think we walked about a mile to get there every day, which nobody thought anything of. Today it would be a hardship, of course, but my dad worked at a dairy farm there, and that's how it was. And New Salem School was my school for the first 2 years. And then we moved around the province a little bit following employment. I spent a lot of time in or near Amisk, and I had the good fortune of having one of the finest teachers that I can imagine, and I hope that my teaching sometimes modeled after hers. She was a wonderful teacher, and if I really think about it, probably that's the reason I had the opportunity to go to university when I finished grade 12.
Those role models are so important, especially during the impressionable years. One of mine was a chap by the name of Harold Daw in grade 6. In an unusual class for all the women, all the girls had higher marks than all the boys. He did his best to raise the rest of us, but was unsuccessful.
Well, Harold was the superintendent who eventually hired me when I came back to Red Deer.
Small world.
It is.
You then went off to university in the University of Alberta, Larry.
Yes. I took a BA, and I enjoyed it very much. Lived in residence, made many good friends, spent a lot of time playing table tennis. Had there been a course in it, we'd have got excellent marks, I think. But it was a growing up experience, and it was a very good place to be. And I did graduate and went into education, ended up with a teaching certificate, and then we had to decide where we would like to work. And my future wife and I really thought Red Deer might be a good place. And I went down and applied. And
that would be about what year, Larry?
Well, I was hired in 64, so I guess it would be in the spring of 64 probably that I made my application. And one of my friends says, "Where else are you applying?" And I said, "Well, I only need one job." And they hired me, and I didn't know how long I would be with them. It was just a start to my career. But it ended up being 33 years of teaching and administration, and it was they were very good to me, and I hope I was good to them.
Can we dwell on that portion of your life?
Sure.
If you want to extend it to your family, who would have grown up in Red Deer then, by all means, some of the highlights, some of the changes and moves and reasons for them.
Well, when I came to Red Deer, they hired me and put me in Annie L. Gates School in grade 5. I think I had 19 kids in my class. That was the standard of the day. It was a new school. Looking to the east was Jim Morris Rose stubble field that fall. And I was a brand new teacher in a brand new school, and we had a very good year. It must have been a very good year because sometime during the summer holidays I got a phone call. "Would you like to be the principal of North Hill School, which is now called Aspen Heights?" And it shocked me. I mean, 1 year of teaching, and would they want me to be a principal? Well, what to do? So I took it. And I was there for 4 years. And really thinking back now, some of my most pleasant memories was that 4-room school with a small staff. You got to know everybody. You got to know their parents. And you get to watch their lives as they grow up and have kids and get jobs and so on. It was a very good start.
And then where did you go from there?
Well, Annie L. Gates School principalship came open, so I applied for it, and I was lucky enough to get it. It was a fine school with wonderful staff, and we had 6 more years in that position. And then I kind of got restless, and so I resigned from the principalship, which I think was a bit of a shock for a few people. It was a strange year because I think 3 principals resigned, and I happened to be one of them. And I don't think there was a common cause. I think it was just the way it was. I ended up at Daw with Don Campbell as the principal, and I taught there for, I think it was 5 years. It was a great school, and again, it was a good experience. From there, I went to North School, just a tiny little school, and I spent a couple years there. I was offered the vice principalship at Piper Creek and became a vice principal. It's a strange career pattern, if ever there was a strange career pattern. And then later I moved to Oriole Park as vice principal and concluded my 33-year career there.
Were most of those schools elementary or middle schools?
The Doss School was a 1 through 9 school, and that was sort of an interesting pattern. Don Campbell had some ideas of using pods with a little grade 1 and some grade 3s and a 4 and 5 and an older child in grade 8 or 9, sort of as the captain of the pods. And we did projects in the gym, and it was quite an interesting thing that mixed the ages together like they never would have been mixed otherwise. But that was the only school that was not an elementary in my experience.
As I guess you approached the end of your career in education, you then went into politics.
Well, I really overlapped them. In 1980, I had a thought about running for council for quite some time, and in 1980 I finally decided to do it. We had an exciting campaign. We weren't very sure what we were doing, but we did it, and I had a lot of friends who volunteered to help, and we did a thing that was really strange. There were no computers in those days, of course, so everybody could do this easily today, but I had about 6 people on my committee who we decided to go through the phone book, and somebody would underline the names of people they could contact with a blue pen, and somebody would use a red pen for others. All 6 of us went through that phone book, and then we printed off a recommendation. So my friends recommended that I be one of the people that you vote for. And I think that was something that made the difference between my campaign and the campaign of a whole lot of other very capable people. And I can remember coming back from Shaw Cable. I had done my little 2 minutes spiel, and I thought I had blown it out of the water. And I go into the house, into the basement, and there's people stuffing envelopes, and there's people going to go out and deliver them to homes. And I was just sure that I had let them right down. Turned out it worked out fine, and I was elected. And it was a little bit scary to be elected because I had never really done that job before. But it was a kind of work that I loved. And I ended up, it turned out to be 15 years that I worked. And most of the time, it was having my teaching job and this part-time job, and it certainly was part-time. That was really a wonderful thing. And then after 15 years, I thought it's time to not do it for a while. Or I really thought I was retiring. And I didn't run in 92, and I finished out my teaching career. But it had been work that I really, really loved, and I guess that probably is why they kept returning me. It was mutual.
What were some of the significant factors or events that Red Deer was facing when you were on council during that period?
I had the great blessing of having 3 excellent mayors to work with over my political career. Bob McGee, Gail Serkan, and Morris Llewellyn. Each of them brought a different set of talents to the job, and they were the right persons for the community at the right time. Bob McGee had been the city engineer, so he knew the nuts and bolts of Red Deer better than anybody else in the community. And he went to work on some projects, and it was the right time to have that kind of leadership. Between him and Mike Day, they worked with a lot of people. Well, rail relocation was a really significant thing. But the Waskesiu Park got developed during that time too. And the Centrium got built. And what I'm probably forgetting some of the big projects that happened during Bob's time. And then in the following time, we ended up, there's a lovely piece of land where 2 high schools were going to be built, and the Collicutt Centre ended up being built there. And so to be part of those projects, and they weren't easy. The Collicutt Centre, I can remember being a lot of criticism. It cost $31 million plus a little bit. Today, that would sound like a wonderful bargain, which it is. But at the time, it seemed like a horrendous expense for recreation in the mind of many, and I know there was a lot of criticism. Today, if you ran on the "Let's Privatize the Collicutt Centre" campaign, even your family wouldn't vote for you.
You finished your first period or era in politics in what, 92?
Yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
and then you were out for a period of time.
Well, it was 3 years.
And what encouraged you to go back in?
My oldest son, I said to him, I think I'm going to get a part-time job. He turned to me and he said, "You won't like it." It shocked me. But he was a sharp kid, and he was probably right. And so I thought about going back and decided to do it. And again, I was lucky enough to be reelected. And I think I had 12 more years that I did that as my only job. And that was very nice too.
One of the, I think it was Morris Swelling that put me up to it when I was chairman of the Normando board. The issue of saving the bridge, the railway bridge, came up, and I well remember going to council and asking them if they would give us the opportunity to put together a submission. And there wasn't too many council members in favor, but I distinctly remember your reply, which was, I would support it, but you've only got 3 months. And we were able to find Shirley Hawken to take the project on in that time, and of course it's happened, and it's such a significant part of the trail system in Waskesiu Park now.
You can't imagine it having not been saved, but at the time it was price-wise, CPR would have taken care of getting it torn down and cleaned up, and that was a saving that the city kind of looked forward to happily. But to have it converted to a walking bicycle bridge, that's a tremendous asset. And to have, if we had looked back now at an empty space without a bridge, we would have, I think, looked very foolish.
No, it was I appreciated the opportunity, not just for those who've enjoyed it since, but the opportunity to try and save it, despite some of the engineering costs that were downstream costs that were going to go with it.
Well, it is a very useful thing, and I'm certainly glad it was saved too. And there was a lot of time, at that time, there was a lot of interest in historical buildings and registering them and saving them. And I think the idea that you know your community partly by knowing the history and the people who came earlier and came at a different time and brought it to where it's at now. And perhaps we aren't as keen on it today as we were 30 years ago.
Well, hopefully some of these oral histories will at least fill in part of that void. My impression of Red Deer, having, I guess, been born here, but I've realized how young it is in relative terms, just the same as Alberta is surprisingly young. And if it doesn't capture its history as it happens, certainly it will lose that.
Well, I think with the courthouse, and it was a struggle to get it saved, but we managed to do so. And what a wonderful building, just picturesque, and a picture of the history of that time, the construction methods, and what was thought to be the right kind of building to build. I think that is a part of our history that you don't need a lecture about. you just look at it and it reminds you of one of the great things that was done in Red Deer. And that was done in the 30s, I believe. It's not very old. You go to older cities in Canada and a building that's built in the 30s, well, it doesn't compete with the things that were built earlier. And if you go to Quebec City, of course, you can see ancient things, the great walls and whatnot, that are fascinating. And had they decided that, well, that wall is useless, tear it down, we would have lost something really precious.
Well, it's great to have some of those points of interest, whether they're included in nature walks around the community, historical walks by people like Michael Daw, but at least it gives a focus for highlighting some of the events in Red Deer's past. I think another building that may have come up in your second tenure would have been the old PDS, Alberta School, and now the Alberta Health Services building, but that was not a simple matter to preserve after the lightning fire occurred.
I was just horrified that it got burned. Again, it was a classic building of its time. And my gosh, the fire was savage, and I thought the bulldozers would be taking it away. And then it seemed like the province just waited and waited and waited to do anything. And I could see the water seeping in and destroying it, and I expected that the study that would be used to justify bulldozing was that, well, so much decay has occurred, it can't be saved. But it was. It must have been built fantastically well to be able to be saved. But now it's sitting there, and again, it's something that is a lesson about our past. Had it been made flat and a concrete building put in as offices, we would have lost something really worthwhile.
Well, it's been a significant part of Red Deer's past. Initially, I think that was where the legislative buildings of Alberta would have gone had they approved Red Deer as the capital of Alberta.
They must look back and be disappointed that they didn't choose Red Deer.
I think that's a delightful. That's an opinion I can agree with.
Okay.
Wholeheartedly. But then, as you know, it went on to such a significant life in its contributions to Red Deer.
Yes.
As a center for them, whether it was as a school initially.
Yeah.
And then as a soldiers rehabilitation center, and then as the center for the training and teaching of the mentally handicapped, and now in its new role as the Center for Health Services in Red Deer. Yeah,
it's had several functions, and all of them have been worthy of their time.
I guess as a side issue, because it does relate to education, it was certainly a lot of work on the part of Michael Daw to put a petition together and put a lot of stories together to try and preserve the building in that in-between period when nobody was certain what would happen to it, and had it not been so well structurally built, it certainly would have gone beyond the time period when it could have been saved.
Yeah, and again, these things that you saved, when you look back at them later, and they are lessons just by looking at them, I think that's very, very thought-provoking, and to be thought-provoking, that's a benefit to a community. If all of your buildings are just functional buildings, it's nice that they do their job, but if they're all functional and they're all gray and they're not thought-provoking, you're left with a community that is very bland and doesn't mean much.
Larry, you were involved in community politics as a council member for so many years, and are there some characteristics or hallmarks or events that strike you as significant, leading to Red Deer being not different but outstanding in a way as it matured because of the people that came to Red Deer and as I certainly remember from my younger years, the people who stayed, because it was very difficult in the earlier years to get talented people to come to Red Deer and stay.
Well, I think we've had a lot of talented people decide to choose Red Deer as a home. I remember one council meeting, and there was a member of the military, and I don't recall his rank, but he and his wife were contemplating retirement, and they had done a very, I don't know if you could call it scientific, but a very thorough study of the places that they might retire to. And they had actually chosen Red Deer. Among all of the places in Canada, they had chosen Red Deer. And I'm sitting in council chambers, and our chests are all, I think we were popping buttons because it was a wonderful thing that someone so thorough and knowledgeable had actually chosen Red Deer as a #1 place to retire. And I think his last name was Moffat, but not related to Dennis Moffat, if I remember correctly. But at any rate, I can remember his explaining to us that this is why we chose Red Deer. And we chose Red Deer too when I was contemplating teaching here. And I remember going to Coronation Park, and it was beautiful then, but it was not the Waskesiu Park that we have now. And we were so impressed with it, I think that brought us to Red Deer. But many people, I think, found things in Red Deer that were special for them. To me, the Waskesiu Park was probably the most important thing that happened during my time on council for ordinary people. Ordinary people bike it and walk it and ski it, and it was pulled together. And we were so fortunate. In Calgary, they had to go south. They couldn't use the Bow River for their park because it had been developed right to the edge. But we had a lot of the area along the Red Deer River that had not yet been developed, and it was available for the Waskesiu Park. And Peter Lougheed's government has to be thanked, and Peter Lougheed has to be thanked for having the great insight that this was what communities needed. And the provincial program was a wonderful program that very many cities benefited from, but certainly Red Deer did. And Red Deer citizens use that park day in and day out, and we walk our dog there every day. And that's this part of it. But it was probably the most important thing for ordinary citizens like us in our lives. Rail relocation was very important. There were a lot of other important things, but I still feel for our community of people like me, the park itself was the big item.
Well, Red Deer, you're absolutely right. It gave Red Deer a unique feature. It was a very substantial project. I mean, I'm not thinking in terms of monetary costs, but in terms of the area of the community that it came to involve. I know when I have friends that come to, relatives, whatever, that come to Red Deer, that's one of the things that it's all possible. That's just great to do, and that's to ride the bike paths.
Yeah.
And there's so many miles of them, given the size of the community. Larry, you've been involved in some other activities in the community, not just politics and education. I think you've been a member of the Kiwanis Club for a number of years. Can you tell us a bit about some of your other extracurricular activities that you've enjoyed? And I know if you've been a part of any of them, you've contributed significantly to them.
Well, the Kiwanis Club is what I'm in right now, and I have been for, about a decade, I suppose. And it's a fine group of people. And it's important when you retire because you don't no longer go to school or go to work and have the interactions you had. You need something else. And for me, the Kiwanis Club served that need of mine. And they do, of course, several very important, useful things. you're going to have to go.
Can you tell us a bit about, because I may not have the opportunity to delve into some of the service club contributions to the community, but the Kiwanis Club's contribution has been almost silent, very quiet, but very significant. I can go back from a family perspective to elaborate on that, but perhaps you tell us a bit about some of its major contributions.
Before my time with the club, it started out as a group that looked at red deer, and one of the big emphasis was finding a way to house seniors who didn't have a lot of cash. And they were able to get what's now Barrett Place, but it was just cabins in the early days, started. And it was the first one in Western Canada to be done that way. And so some seniors who didn't have enough cash as they got to the point where they had to retire, they were able to move into those cabins at a modest cost and live out the rest of their days in dignity. And the Kiwanis Club went on to develop Barrett Place and several other ones. I think there were over 350 units that were built by the Kiwanis Club, not completely funded by the club itself, but built and operated. And how many people lived out their days in each of those units at a time that government was not into that in the way it is today. And what a terrible thing to be getting to the age where you can't work as much as you had when you were younger, and you can't afford a home, and you're coming to the end of your days. Well, to have this opportunity available, that was a real big thing. There are a number of other things. Camp Sherbino was bought, and the buildings were put up, and it was a lot of work and a lot of investment. And the Girl Guides made use of it very much, and still do. And the Kiwanis Club still owns that piece of property. And we maintain the club, the buildings, and we're not into driving nails and shingling anymore, but we make sure it gets done.
That's at Sylvan Lake.
That's at Sylvan Lake, yes. And it serves all of central Alberta.
I can remember that Kiwanis project goes back to the 1950s.
That's right.
I can remember when my grandfather was aging and became increasingly difficult to look after him. And the Kiwanis first facility that Kiwanis built had just opened, and we were able to move him there, where he spent a couple of years. But it did meet the criteria you were mentioning. It was a relief from our point of view. It was certainly a safety. There was a safety issue, as there often is, and there was a behavioral challenge. But it was just a perfect opportunity for everyone, and we could still visit them.
Yeah. And I think that happened over and over and over for many people for many years. And the government decided to buy those facilities out, and the sum of money that they gave to the Kiwanis Club, or to the Twilight Homes Foundation is what it really was, has been reinvested in the community. I think the Twilight Homes Foundation has donated about $3 million to the community through projects of various kinds over the years, and that's a great investment too. So that's the way the community has functioned. That people have got together into groups called service clubs, done things sometimes quietly, sometimes with a lot of fanfare, but they've got the things done that have been needed in the community. And the Kiwanis is one group, the Lions. I shouldn't start listing clubs because I'm going to miss some. But there's many that have done a great deal of good for a great number of people. The one sport that we got into in the winter.
Just before we leave the Kiwanis one, can you tell us a bit about the music festival that they initiated? It still goes on.
Yes.
I know it has long roots.
Well, it does have long roots. It was set up by the Kiwanis Club, and members did a lot of the volunteer work, still do. But at some point, it became practical for another board unique to that project to take it on and not to be any longer just the Kiwanis Club. But the music festival has grown. And well, I think of in sport, if in baseball or football, what do? You practice, you get pretty good at what you're doing. You need a game, you need a playoff, you need some highlights. Well, if you're a violinist, or if you play the trombone, or if you like musical theater, what do you need? You need some kind of a highlight so that you have a chance to explore your passion, to practice and get very good, and then you go to that highlight. And the music festival is to those people, those kids primarily, as what a football game is, or a baseball game is, or a hockey game is to a lot of other kids. And it has lasted for, I forget how many years, but it's almost forever.
Well, Roger's certainly been advantaged by the work of Margaret Parsons in particular, putting the performing arts as a priority for the Red Deer College and allowing activities like that are so central to the community to have their regular and learning experiences, training experiences, and then performances to go with them. And a great deal to expand the cultural opportunities and perspectives of the community.
Absolutely. And we hope that in the future it carries on in that direction with a lot of strength, because it means so much to so many. Sport, cross-country skiing has been our thing to do in the winter, and I guess what it boiled down to is we said, it looks like we're going to stay, and we have winter, we'd better figure out what to do. And why don't we learn to ski? Well, we were in our 30s. That seemed old to us at the time. We know now that it wasn't. But we decided that we would be downhill skiers. We took lessons at Canyon, and then we bought a pass at the Innisfil ski hill. Little rope tow, nice little hill, friendly people. And we skied a few years there. And then we moved to Canyon and skied a couple of years there. And then we ended up doing some cross-country skiing. And that was really a wonderful sport. Our youngest son, well, one day we were going along and he's about 50 yards ahead of us, and what the heck? The tails of his skis were coming up. He was striding and gliding. Who taught him that? I didn't. I was just a beginner skier. My wife didn't. He just grew into it. And he became a ski racer. Don Wales worked with him through the college. He accompanied, as a high school kid, he accompanied the college team to whatever races they were going to. And he ended up on the Alberta ski team and had a good time there. And now his son is on the Alberta ski team, and
third generation.
It's been another generation. And actually, I might as well brag about him now. He won a race in Finland this year. And, to win a race in Europe, that's a pretty big pat on the back.
Yes, I was never a very good downhill skier, but my enjoyment came just from what I always thought was a lot more exercise you could get with cross-country skiing, especially if you're going uphill and downhill a little bit, and the fact that we have a 1 hour's drive to the mountains and can take advantage of some of the ski opportunities there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, in a similar sense, that's been an enjoyment, although my cross-country was not very prominent or important when I went to university, so I ended up on the cross-country cross-country athletic team and for quite a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And enjoy that and still do.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean to sidetrack it.
Well, it's an interesting thing. Something catches a hold of you and steers you. And that's sort of how your life goes along. Something gets a hold of you and steers you in a direction for a while. And who knows where that's going to, what that blossom is going to be.
That's part of the lives that we're celebrating
Yeah.
in these oral histories. So Larry, I thank you very much for creating the opportunity to have a chat with you and get up to date on some of your family activities and more particularly some of the involvements you've had in Red Deer and the contributions that you've made. And I'd like to thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed this chat with you, and Red Deer is our home. It's been our home forever, I guess, almost over 50 years, and it has offered us a lot, and we hope that we've been good to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.